Hey, this is Antonio. Welcome back to my channel. So who's ready for some fighting words? In this video, I want to do a fight breakdown / prediction for Errol Spence Jr., The Truth, versus Terence Bud Crawford. And if you're new to the channel, you don't know how I do it. So basically what I do is I match both fighters side by side, and I just go down the list, and whoever has more points in the end, that's the individual that I'm going with. That's the person I'm picking for the fight. So without further ado, let's jump into this. The first we got to go with speed. I'm giving speed to Terence Bud Crawford, mostly because he's coming from a smaller weight and he's moved up. So I'm going to pick him for speed. And I think that's a safe assessment. Not to say that Errol Spence is not a fast fighter, but he's not particularly known for his speed. And I'm not even saying that, Terence Bud Crawford is particularly known for his speed. But being that he's coming from a lighter weight, moving up, or has moved up throughout recent fights, I'm definitely going to go with him for speed. And to be honest with you, I don't think it's going to be like by large margins or anything like that when it comes to speed. But I think in a fight so close with two individuals who both at the peak of their physical abilities and in the prime of their fighting careers, I think that even if it's a millisecond, plays a huge role in winner and loser. Secondly, power. I'm also going to give this to Terence Bud Crawford. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people mad at me because of this, but the reality is Errol Spence is the truth. Errol Spence, yeah, man down. However, I've never really seen Errol Spence, I've never seen Errol Spence man down anybody with one punch. I have seen Terence Bud Crawford man down people with one punch, and because of that, I'm going with Terence Bud Crawford. I'm not saying Spence can't do it, but I don't necessarily think if he can, since he hasn't in the past, but if he can, I definitely don't think that Terence Bud Crawford is going to be the guy who he starts with. So I got to go with Terence Bud Crawford for power. Intelligence. This is a tough one because depending on the way the fight goes or is dictated, both of them have intelligence. A lot of people will look at Errol Spence and say he's a weight bully, he's this, he's that, but the reality is he's a very intelligent fighter. He's a smart fighter. He's not as reckless as he comes across. He looks to be very reckless, but he's not. He's not a reckless fighter at all. He's a very calculated fighter. I think because of his pace and his punch output, he can seem a bit reckless, but there's nothing reckless about Terence Bud Crawford, Errol Spence. However, then you have Terence Crawford, who is very paced, very calm, very poised, very calculated about every step that he takes and every punch that he throws. It's really kind of hard to say. Initially I was going to give this a tie, but only, and hear me out, only because of the different looks that Terence Crawford can give you, and only because of the traps that Terence Crawford can set, I'm going to say he's the more intelligent fighter, because Errol Spence can either Errol Spence a situation or he can Errol Spence a situation. He's going to super outclass box you, or he's going to super outclass output punching you. It's either one or the other. So he's just going to run over you, or he's just going to beat you to the punch. But he's going to be Errol Spence in either way. He can be Errol Spence with a little bit of distance. Case in point, the Mikey Garcia fight. Or he's going to be Errol Spence versus Sean Porter versus your Dennis Ugas. Or he's just kind of going to steamroll through you. He's going to muscle his way through. So I'm just going to say that intelligence would have to go to Terence Bud Crawford just because of the ways that he gets opponents out of there. That shows intelligence, because not everybody gets put out the same way as the last opponent when it comes to Terence Bud Crawford. So I got to give intelligence to Terence Bud Crawford. Boxing ability, I think, pretty much goes back to the intelligence. I think both are great boxers. Again, I think the masterclass of all masterclasses was Errol Spence when he took out Danny Garcia, but also when he took out Mikey Garcia. I mean, he just demolished those guys. And the thing about it is when he's doing this, the guys kind of just succumb. And they, like Danny Garcia, there was nothing more sad than the look in his eyes when he realized this dude ain't going to slow down. This dude ain't going to stop. This dude's going to throw another 100 punches after he just threw 100 punches. That's frustrating. Very, very, very frustrating. But again, that kind of goes with the Errol Spence of steamrolling somebody. So I can't. I mean, he definitely outboxed Danny Garcia. He definitely outboxed Mikey Garcia. But when I look at overall in all his fights, Terence Bud Crawford, he'll box. He prefers to box. You get him in a situation, he'll end up banging it out and fighting it out. But his bread and butter is going to be boxing. His bread and butter is figuring out the puzzle of whomever the opponent is in front of him. That's what it is. So to be safe with this one, because it's so easy, and I've heard a lot of individuals talking about Terence Bud Crawford just being this unbelievable boxer over Errol Spence. It's so easy to say that. But Mikey Garcia is no pushover. Danny Garcia, is he the most skilled boxer in the world? No, he's not. But his resume spoke for itself. And on any given night, you can watch the fight with Danny Garcia and you can make the argument that he beat Keith Thurman. So I'm just going to give this a tie. Heart. Now, again, this is kind of tough. Because of the Kell Brook fight and because of the Sean Porter fight, I'm going to say the heart goes to Errol Spence. Just because of those two fights, because it took a lot out of him. I mean, the Kell Brook fight was really hard for him. I mean, he actually backed off. You hardly ever see Errol Spence back off. I mean, he ran off in that fight. In one round, he ran off. He got pushed back. You hardly ever see that happen. It hasn't really happened ever since. Sean Porter did have spots in the fight, but it wasn't a sustained attack that forced Errol Spence off. Kell Brook actually did it. He actually did it. Of course, Errol Spence came back and fought back through it. But nonetheless, he fought the truth off. And because of that, he showed real grit, real heart. And on top of that, he went into... It's one thing to say I'm going into another guy's backyard. But it's something else when that backyard is another country. It's another country. Terence Crawford, he's done it, but not in another country. And to be honest, I've never really seen Terence in a sticky situation. Where you're like, I've never really seen Terence Crawford in that situation. Yeah, he got dropped. The whole Gamboa thing. But I think that was, one, him being off balance. Two, him just kind of being caught up in a flurry and a frenzy. So I don't put too much into that. And then three, him rushing. So I don't really put too much into the Gamboa fight, to be honest with you. So just because of the Kell Brook and the Sean Porter fight, I'm going to go with Errol Spence for heart. That's not to say that Terence Bud Crawford does not have heart. I'm just saying he has not been put in the compromising positions that Errol Spence has. So therefore, I think it's just safest to say that Errol Spence has that heart because we've seen it time and time again. Mentality. I think both of these guys were meant to be champions. I think both of these guys are going to go down into the record books, the Hall of Fame. They both have the same mentality. Errol Spence came into the game talking about man down. When he was a relative nobody from Texas, he was talking about man down. And he was calling out people that, people would say, well, you don't have the right to be calling this person out right now. He was doing that back then. Terence Crawford, again, championship, quality, caliber fighter. He had already become a unified, champion at 140. Now he's moving up. That's just in him. That's just in him. And he pushes himself. And also, when I speak of the mentality of Terence Bud Crawford, he not only was trying to push for this fight with Errol Spence, but when he figured he couldn't get it, he was like, I'll go for Charlo. That's your homeboy, right? You guys are from Texas. I'm going to go after your big homeboy. He goes after Charlo. Says he wants a Charlo fight. He says he's going to go up to 140 and knock out Charlo. So that's his mentality. And he's not talking about chumps. He's talking about Charlo, a real knockout artist, mind you, and also a unified champion. And in my personal opinion, should be pound for pound right now, like, that's neither here nor there. That's another video. But I'm just saying, that's his mentality. I think they're Italian mentality. I don't think either one of them sees himself getting beaten, especially not right now. I feel like they both feel as if they're on top of their game. Errol Spence came back from the car accident on a crazy tear and roll, and he hasn't slowed down since. And he's had a newfound, reinvigorated sense of purpose, but also achievement and accomplishments that he wants to set in the ring. And he's been on a tear, and he's been really chiming for this fight. Terence Crawford has been chiming for this fight since forever, so that's nothing new. So I honestly, I got to give them both a tie for this because they both have championship mentalities. And like I said, it really doesn't matter who it is. I think they would still be at this place. I think they were just destined to knock everybody off in the division where they would just be the only two left standing, and they would have to do something about it. Arsenal. Now, this one is also tough. I think they both have a large arsenal. Errol Spence, I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for his arsenal. But, like, for example, he has an amazing jab. Crazy, stupendous body puncher. He has a hook that literally, you see what it did to Sean Porter. But when it comes to arsenal, I'm not just talking about the weapons that you use. I'm also talking about the tactics that you use to set up those weapons. That's what I'm talking about. And I'm sorry, when it comes to arsenal, I have to attach the tactics to go along with it. And when I do that, I can only come up with Terence Bud Crawford. He is going to set more traps. It's kind of easy for Errol Spence to do what he does if he's just going to steamroll through you. Terence Bud Crawford, on the other end, won't just steamroll through anybody. He's never steamrolled through anybody. He's playing chess in there. He wants to get you in a certain position. He wants to get you at a certain angle. He wants to hit you with a particular punch. And he needs to get it at a certain spot in the ring. And he has to line you up for these things. Tactics, people. That's what I'm talking about. And then you pick the perfect punch to go along with that particular tactic. Not many people can do that. Not many people can do that. And I've referred people back to this fight in particular several times when I speak of tactics. I just think it's a great example. The Floyd Mayweather fight when he fought Miguel Cotto. What was it, like the 6th or 7th round? He realized he's going to keep pushing me back. I need something that's going to get him off of me when he pushes me back to this rope. He tried everything else. He was trying to check hooks. He was trying to jab. He was trying to do, work with his footwork. Nothing was working. He was still ending up on the ropes. And then by, I believe it was 6 or 7, he discovered the uppercut. And everything from that fight, for round 6 on in, changed due to that uppercut from Floyd Mayweather. Tactics. Yes, you have to have the right punch because everybody's susceptible to something. But you also need the right tactic to make them susceptible to it. Tactics. Therefore, I got to give it to Terence Bud Crawford. Resume. Now, this is tough. I'm only giving it to Errol Spence because he has Danny Garcia on his record. And he has Mikey Garcia on his record. That's the reason why I'm giving it to him. But Terence Bud Crawford is a unified champ at 140. I'm sorry. He moved up. He accomplished everything you can accomplish at 140 and moved up. So technically they should be a tie, but because Errol Spence has Danny Garcia and Mikey Garcia on his record, I'm going to give him the resume. Adaptability. I don't necessarily think Errol Spence adapts to anything. I just think Errol Spence kind of digs deeper into being Errol Spence. If when in doubt, just step on the gas when it comes to Errol Spence. And then you have Terence Bud Crawford. And again, it's like, okay, this isn't working. Well, let me try this. This isn't working. Let me see if I can kill him with some footwork. This isn't working. Let me try a high guard. Let's just see what's going to work. And that's being adaptable. And on top of that, he can do that mid-round. He doesn't have to wait till he gets in his corner and get some instruction. He has enough intel from fighting his opponent and know how to implement that in the moment. Adaptability. Now, I have some questions to end this out. What does Spence have to do to win this fight? I think he has to keep a very high pace and punch output and attack the body early. We all know in order for Terence Bud Crawford to win this fight against Errol Spence, he's going to have to use his footwork. He's going to have to keep some space. If Spence can get to that body early enough, he can slow Terence down. The mobility of his legs, he can slow him down. That's number one. Number two, there is no way on this green earth that Terence Crawford can keep up with the work rate of Errol Spence. It's just not going to happen. I have yet to see anybody else do it in the division. I don't think Terence Crawford is that guy. And I don't think he's going to even attempt to try to do that. I don't think he can. So there you have it. You got to have that high punch output like he did with Mikey Garcia. Fast pace. I mean, from round one, let him know you're there and you are the truth. And go to that body. Just be a dog. Run through him. You are the naturally bigger guy. Run through him. What does Crawford have to do? Well, for one, he has to create the space. He also has to look to slow Spence down. How is he going to slow Spence down? A jab. How is he going to slow Spence down? Angles. How is he going to slow Spence down? He can play with him a little bit. He is ambidextrous, so he can fight on the right side. He can fight on the left side. He can mix it up a little bit. That's how he's going to slow Spence down. He's also going to use a whole lot of footwork. That's how he's going to slow Spence down. Spence take one step. If Spence is to take one step forward, Crawford needs to take one step back. Crawford is just as great fighting backwards as he is fighting forwards. So it's not going to hinder him in any way, shape, or form. I don't necessarily feel like he should commit early to a body attack. But in the same way, I kind of feel like he does. And I'll tell you why. Because Errol Spence gets better as the rounds go on. Even with a high punch output, he gets better as the rounds go on. So I think it's dangerous if Crawford goes to his body early, to be honest with you. But what he can do is mess him up. Mess him up. That jab, that two uppercuts, I think are, because Errol, he sometimes likes to tilt forward. I think an uppercut is right there for him. I think a shovel hook is right there for him. But he's going to have to slow him down. He's definitely going to have to create some space. Again, if Errol takes a step forward, you take a step back. And again, I'm not talking about crazy tactics that you got to do to implement or do anything like that. No, these are simple things that can be done on the fly, that can be just tweaked. That's all it is. What Bud can't afford to do with Spence? Get in a brawl. We all know Terence Bud Crawford has a bit of a mean streak. And there's been countless stories of him, when he was an amateur and things like that. A lot of stories of him, at fights in a crowd with people, arguing with somebody or backstage. You cannot let your anger get the better of you in this fight. If ever there were a time you need to stay poised and composed and focused at the task at hand and not let your emotions run wild, it's this fight. Spence is not an emotional fighter. He only has one way of fighting, and that's go. Go, go, go. You can't get emotional. You can't get riled up. You can't get caught into a bar fight. You can't get caught into a street fight, an alley fight. You can't do any of those things. You have to stay focused. Box, box, box. Do not get into a scrap. That's not what you want. You're going to fall right into Errol Spence's hands if you get into a scrap. Spence can't let Bud think or dictate the pace of the fight. One thing Errol Spence cannot do is let Bud Crawford think. He's a real tactician in the ring. If he has the time and the space and to operate mentally on his next steps, that's like a downhill slope for Errol Spence. It's a downhill slope. He needs to close that gap. He needs to close it early. That's a downhill slope. Terence Bud Crawford is too much of an intellectual fighter, too much of a thinker, okay? And one thing that thinkers like to do is create space so they can think, so they can operate. If Errol Spence gives Terence Crawford too much respect and allows him to think, that's the beginning of the end for him. And that's a downward trajectory. Can't let him do that. Spence cannot let Bud think or dictate that space. He just can't do it. It's just not going to be good for him. It's just not going to be good for him. And I understand that, like, yeah, Spencer gets better over the time, but I think here's how it works sometimes. You can get messed up early, and sometimes mentally you cannot recover from getting messed up early. So I think it's just safe that he doesn't allow that stuff to happen. I mean, I'm at the end of the video. I know it's a really long video, and I apologize for that, but I did have a lot to say. I mean, we are talking about the fight of the fight. You know, people consider it like the biggest fight in a very long time. I'll probably say maybe since Pacquiao and Mayweather, you know, in terms of build-up and expectation. But according to my points, I got Terence Bud Crawford winning. And I know a lot of you going to be mad at me, and you know the routine. Drop your comments down below, as always. I like reading them. I like going back and forth with you. I got Terence Bud Crawford by a TKO. I don't necessarily think he can knock Errol Spence out, but I do think he can get him in trouble. And I do think it's going to be downhill from there. The way Errol Spence fight, he doesn't want to back up. He doesn't know how to back up. His mentality will not let him back up. And because of that, if he does that with Terence Bud Crawford, he's just walking into a trap. He's just walking into a trap. And my question is, how does he respond to the traps? That's the question. How does he respond to the traps? And there will be more than one. There will be more than one trap, people. So I have Terence Bud Crawford winning by TKO. Either his people are going to throw in a rag, which I seriously doubt that corner would do. So I'm looking more at that referee. But that's what I have. I have Terence Bud Crawford winning by a technical knockout. If you like what you're hearing, please like, share, subscribe, and also drop your comments down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say.